And that's how we need to approach these conversations about race. Treat them like they took your wallet and focus on the part that matters, holding each person accountable for the impact of their words and actions.
Talk is not enough. Your story inspires us to think about the power that not only students, but all individuals have to make a difference in the world.
There are two rivers going across time, that we shall live on this land and share this land as brothers.
It's great to be able to sit down with you, Bridget, here in Montreal at ACPA, and I'm really excited to just kind of talk with you about different ways that we can move forward with the social justice and inclusion competencies. You and I generated a lot of really great conversation, and between the two of us, I feel like we can help provide some beginning entry points to start, for professionals to start thinking about these competencies. So Bridget, can you talk about what the profession's role is in creating an environment where people can express themselves as their whole selves?
It's great. I think that that question really speaks to what we are as a field. When I think about care for the whole person and care for the whole self, and what does that really mean when we kind of drill down into people's multiple identities and how people are socialized probably to be perceived as target identities or agent identities or marginalized or privileged. And so I think our role is really to create a space for us to deconstruct some of that socialization that people have come into college with, and as the time where they're free and not maybe as directly influenced by parents or religious affiliations or neighborhoods or their schools, where they can start to say, who am I really and who is my whole self, and to really give them a space to do that, I think is our field's profession and purpose.
They may very well have issues with your issue. Listen to them. Listen to what they have to say. Listen to understand, not to win. Because when you listen to them, you'll be able to identify what the underlying concern is. And over the course of several more conversations, you'll be able to frame your passion in a way that will allow them to listen. And listening does not mean agreeing.
Whether they're cultural centers for people to express that, whether they're interfaith dialogue sessions that we provide, whether it's support in the classroom where we're talking to faculty and they're about the types of environments that they even create within their class for people to be their whole selves, whether that's thinking about pronouns, usage, whether that's people thinking about what name do you want to be called, may be different from the roster that the faculty members. So I think the purview is wide, but that's because that's what our purpose as a field is to do.
How do privilege, power, and oppression affect our work as individuals in student affairs?
For me, I don't think I was as an effective educator until I really identified what some of my privileges are. For example, my cisgender privilege was something that I just have started to reflect on recently, and I've been doing this work for a long time. But to think about how uncomfortable I am sometimes naming my pronouns and stating that in the beginning of an introduction, for example, and my cisgender privilege allows me to not have to worry about that or think about that.
We're going to talk about myself really quick here, just to put it into context. I myself, I identify as male. My pronouns are he, him, and his. My gender expression, for the most part, is quite masculine. Sometimes I like to go quite feminine as well. Then there's my birth sex. There's a little M. Night Shyamalan twist. I was born female. So I grew up in the female gender role. And my attraction, too, is to a very lovely man by the name of James Rushton. We actually got engaged this past June. Thank you.
What self-work have you done to reflect upon your own biases and prejudices?
We as educators need to do the work, I believe, before we ask students and colleagues and others to do the work. And so I think it's been a progression of 15 to 20 years of making sure I participate in workshops when people like Jamie Washington or Kathy O'Bear come to my campus, or people that are, identified social justice educators, making sure that I don't just send people to those, but go to them myself. Asking students to watch documentaries that I make sure I watch myself. So one of them is For the Bible Tells Me So, and that really struck me around my Christian privilege.
We create artificial passport demands on students who enter the borders of our campuses. For those students who are not white and Christian, it is the first thing they see on a campus visit, a cross and a chapel. Crossing a border forces us to think about what it means when people try and navigate the artificial barriers we've created out of walls of prejudice and discrimination, our own internalized phobias, whiteness, power, privilege. Crossing a border helps us think about our own fear and what it's like for a student or faculty member or administrator or staff person who doesn't carry that power and privilege.
What that identity has meant to people who are marginalized, but also for me, what it means to hold that identity, but also hold that tendency that it's marginalized and it's liberated, and how do I kind of hold those two tensions when I do the work, my own self-work around privilege and oppression.
Entering relationships and spaces with like a privileged identity?
In many ways, I think it's been a self push, because I choose to identify as a social justice educator, and I've done research in social justice and have chosen to teach and had that be my life's work, mostly because I was transformed by it as a student, and so I wanted to be a part of that hopefully transformative experience for other people. But I've really been pushed most by my students, not by my administrators or not by my deans or even colleagues to say, hey, are you really doing social justice work here, but more my students. And so again, pushing them, I remember a time where a student, pushed back on me and I said, class is really one of the things that I have a hard time thinking about and discussing. I'm from an upper middle class background, and so I'm definitely in the privilege category for socioeconomic class. And one of my students said, well, what have you done around your own class work? And I really had to take a step back and say, well, what have I done to really examine that? And so that's been something that I've made a part of my self-work recently, but the push has really been participating in activities on campus. That's been kind of an impetus that I had. I wish it had been more of a institutionalized push, but it's been more of an internal kind of wanting to be the change that I wish to see in others.